Welcome to the first episode of Design Over Time, which is a daily video log where I talk about just about anything that's related to design, mostly game design, and we just go through a different topic every day. This is pretty much a good replacement for my old blog, Critical Gaming, and instead of writing all this stuff, you know, over 1 million words worth of content and putting it on a website, I figured I'd do something like this, a little bit easier to produce, hopefully, and something that I can get out on a daily basis, talking about the things that I just think about on a daily basis in terms of game design, new ideas, fixes to games I'm playing, concepts I come across on the internet, whatever, anything goes. And hopefully these videos will be pretty short so that I can not only do this every day, but you can tune in every day and then give me feedback and we can just go with it. So recently I beat every single level in Snakebird, and this game is fantastic. It's one of my favorite puzzle games. If I can show you the list, I'll switch screens here. So here is a list that I keep online where anyone can view it. It's just open, and it is a list of all the games I've ever played. And I also keep stats on things like ranking the games by genre or ranking them by series. And as you can see for the puzzle column right here, Snakebird is number 7 on the list. And let's talk a little bit about what makes a good puzzle game and what makes Snakebird so unique. So I'm going to show you a few quick seconds of the intro levels of Snakebird, and you can just kind of see for yourself what it looks like. You control a little bird. It's also a snake. And then after eating the fruits on the stage, you can get to the rainbow colored exit. And it's pretty straightforward. That's pretty much what the game is like. So I want to go over a lot of the unique things that make this game so special. And pause. Okay, so here are my notes. Snakebird obviously is like the game Snake, and if you haven't seen the game Snake, it looks a little bit like... So a classic game of Snake, we all probably played something like this on our old cell phones before they became smartphones. Basic idea is a random apple appears and you have to go chase it down. You have up, down, left, right movement, and every time you eat an apple, your tail goes longer. But pretty much, this is what we mean by snake movement. You get longer every time you eat something and your tail follows your head, and you can only control your head. So yeah, obviously Snakebird is like Snake. The movement alone makes it 99% more complex than most movement in other games. Other games, you're pretty much controlling a single unit, and how you move that unit, where you put it, that unit, where you fit it into, what you dodge, and everything. It's all pretty easy to understand because it's just translating a single small shape. But Snake, as you get longer, it gets more complicated, and because your tail's always following your head, you have to be aware of the history of your action. It makes your movement a little bit more consequential. The other kind of game that Snakebird is like is Sokoban. This is a classic pushing block game. It was created by a Japanese developer a while ago. Well, since then it's been popular among puzzle games. You pretty much push blocks on switches, and because you're kind of fixed inside of a room or a warehouse, how you push the boxes and where you go is a big deal. It makes it a lot more complex than it seems, because you can easily wedge a box in a way to where you cannot push it off or where you cannot reverse the action. So floors and walls and other cubbies become significant level obstacles that you have to work around. And the final game that Snakebird probably is most like is Portal. Spoiler alert, there are portals in Snakebird. I'll show you some. So there are levels like this in Snakebird where you can actually enter portals, and that's very much like the game Portal. Obviously, moving characters through space. A lot of puzzle games do a lot with either switches or portals these days, but this is just kind of an easy way to understand some of the things that this game is about, some of the features that it has. So we'll stop that, go back here. So, in terms of complexity, Snakebird is it's a really elegant game. Puzzle games in general are very elegant. They do a lot with a very little. So in Snakebird, all the elements in the entire game are just birds. You can have a maximum of 3 birds on the screen per puzzle. You know, there's platforms to move on. We could just call that the ground. There's fruit, spikes. There's a goal. There are blocks that you can push of various sizes and shapes, and then there are portals, and that's it for the entire game. 53 different levels that are really challenging. Starting at around level 6, people have commented often that the game has a really sharp difficulty curve, and You can only control one snake at a time. That keeps things nice and simple. There's only one goal per level, so you never have to go like, oh, do I go for this goal or this goal? All the levels are single screen. There are no MacGuffins or extraneous manipulable elements, so they don't give you a bunch of stuff on the screen, and you have to figure out which ones are actually useful for progressing to the goal. Just about everything in every single level is an important obstacle or element for progressing to the goal, so there's not a lot of distractions, if you will. The level design is conservative in terms of complexity, so even though they could have made some pretty large levels, they keep a lot of the gameplay down to just a handful of things that can be done on the screen. Like, I'll just click around in this video. This level is just this tiny little structure right here that you see on the screen. This level is exactly what you see. It's just a structure that's these 4 little parts. Later in the game, one pillar floating out in the middle of the ocean. I'll back up a little bit. Yeah, one pillar floating out in the middle of the ocean. So you see here that that's all there is to the level. You see this one, not too many elements. So like, if you were expecting just huge, sprawling, complex things, Snakebird does a lot with a little, even more so than other puzzle games. And we're kind of getting to the heart of why, but we'll see in a second. So the reason why Snakebird can do this is because there are so many rippling dynamic and spatial elements in the game. And that's kind of what makes Snakebird deep. So as the final notes for this particular episode of this particular entry of Design Over Time, I just want to talk about what makes Snakebird deep. A lot of people talk about puzzle games, but all they say is, you know, did it stump you? Is it hard? Is it easy? Is it too hard? But that's really has nothing to do with, you know, what the actual gameplay is like and how it makes you think. And for the most part, just like normal video games, they're designed for you to beat them. So if you think it's too hard, maybe this genre is not your thing, or you're not playing it right, or you just didn't take it seriously, you didn't have enough time, whatever. Doesn't matter, but the things we want to talk about are actually how the game works, how does it make us think, what are some strategies that we can use to better understand the gameplay better and have a lot more fun playing it. And getting into that conversation, we have to discuss what makes Snakebird deep. So in general with puzzle games, they challenge you to figure out a sequence of moves to get from the beginning state to the end goal state, and oftentimes this requires players to think ahead. In general, they put obstacles in the way, people put switches in puzzle games, they put all kinds of things to make sure that you have to think ahead before you move, and that's like the main difference between the basic interactions of a puzzle game versus the action game. So there are a lot of dynamic rules at play in Snakebird, and you know, I wrote a series before on my blog. So interesting choices and interesting gameplay. A lot of times people talk about gameplay being deep, and they talk about this Sid Meier's coined term called interesting choices, and how strategy games need to have these things in order for them to work. But this article series kind of breaks down what that means and how it can apply to more than just strategy games. And in this case, towards the end of the series, part 6 of this article series, I talked about the 4 key elements that you need in order to make a game have interesting choices in the first place. And in a nutshell, you know, you need variables and properties. You need to have elements in your game that can hold data values, like to be of a certain type, to be of a certain position or whatever, and that's kind of the foundation of what your game is. And then you need mechanics. You need to be able to act or do things in this game, give players some choice, otherwise it's not a game. And then the next most important thing is you need dynamics in your system, and these are very specific things that connect various properties, variables, and rules to each other. So, you know, the game wouldn't be very interesting if every time you moved, that's all there was. But every time you moved, maybe you move something else, you activate a switch, the switch opens a door. Like the resulting actions and how they're connected are what makes gameplay rich. And then the final thing is interplay. A lot of strategy games need this right here. Puzzle games kind of thrive on having solvable states. So we're not trying to make this game unsolvable like strategy games are in multiplayer video games. We actually want the player to solve the solution and only to be happy and fine with just having one answer. So puzzle games don't need interplay like strategy games do. Interplay is not a necessary component. Therefore, Snakebird doesn't really have hardly any of it, and it just plays around mostly with its dynamic systems. So just by making a gameplay feature 2D gravity, or 2D space with gravity, that's the core gameplay dynamic that all the other elements revolve around. Everything being in a space and having sort of a physical property is just like the foundation of how this game works. From there, your ability to figure out how to get to the goal it's a matter of sequencing, and sequencing is essentially the essence of causal logical solutions. The reason why you can't go straight to the goal is because there's some obstacle, or the reason the goal is solvable in the first place is because you can overcome that obstacle. So what things do you need to do before getting to the goal in order to make that happen? And you start to sort of see that there's a whole logic to it, there's a whole procedure to it, and we just call this sequencing. And for Snakebird, orientation matters. Your movement is asymmetrical. That means you can't just go forward and backwards and kind of dance around in space. You have to snake around yourself, and that's why that core unique element of what makes Snakebird so good is its snake-like movement. So you have to move around yourself. The way you're facing determines how you can move, and birds have different links. So all these things make figuring out the order and orientation of how to proceed to the goal a lot more difficult than it is in other games. Stacking. You can stack your birds on top of each other. You can stack objects, the blocks on top of them, and it creates these really complex, frictionless machines, I call them. And the moving parts are the Snakebirds and the blocks, but you push them using the birds themselves, and because the birds can stand on top of each other, you can create these really complex structures, kind of like Crash Mode, where all the blocks are resting on top of each other, and where you pull them, what you push into them, which direction you pull them, all that makes a difference. And gravity just also makes it to where you can't easily undo things when they fall. So you have to be really aware of height and potential energy and all of that. And the final element that makes sequencing and figuring out just exactly what to do in Snakebird so challenging is this concept of how the fruits and the end goal play off of each other. Fruits, just like in the original Snake, dynamically make Snakebirds grow longer, and they also remove a platform. So I'll show you here. So right here you can see the bird is floating up on the strawberry. Fruits are also platforms, but as soon as you eat them, obviously you are no longer able to suspend yourself in midair. So you know that also makes sequencing more difficult. You have to figure out which direction to eat the fruit, if you're in danger when you fall, and so on and so forth. So fruits are not only just a necessary element to getting to the goal, but they are also these dynamic floating platforms, and that also adds to the complexity of sequencing. And when there's multiple birds, any bird can eat the fruit, but determining which bird grabs it, how long that will make the bird, what that means for you getting to the goal is all very interesting, very sort of challenging, difficult considerations. So put all these elements together, Snakebird is this really, really complex game. All the fruits have to be eaten before you get to the goal, and all birds must reach the goal. So no matter what the game throws at you, the one thing you're going to be doing every single time in Snakebird is just looking carefully at what you're given, trying to figure out what your next move is, trying to figure out how to get to the goal, trying to figure out which direction your bird needs to be. Like, this is a really good example. Dude. So this example, the fruit is floating all the way off the side of the stage, and the only way to get there safely is to have your birds facing left, but fully extended like this, so that the final bird can get on top and worm its way back. If these birds were facing right, they wouldn't be able to drag themselves back towards the goal. So it's just a simple example of, even if you know which direction you have to face, or how do you make it to where, in whatever space you're given, that the birds can be in that particular orientation. Just makes the game a lot of fun. It makes it to where these levels look deceptively simple, but figuring out exactly how to get it done, it's just a matter of looking at all these interconnected pieces. Like right here is definitely a case where you're making a complex stack of birds. And because blue can push green, and green shaped like a number 2 or a Z, that it pushes red down here because the tail is kind of in red's face, and that's why this whole structure can kind of slide to the side. But it's complex stuff like that that's not intuitive. It's not really obvious. And even though the basic rules are really simple and straightforward, this game gets pretty hard pretty quickly, and I like it. That's why it's cool. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, be sure to let me know in the comments. You can follow me on Twitter at KirbyKid. or at Design Oriented. If you get your questions in before the end of the week, I'll probably answer them on video, so that's a good reason to keep up on a daily basis. Tomorrow I might go over a little bit more Snakebird. I kind of wanted to break down the level design and go specifically level by level and show exactly how the difficulty curve ramps up by looking at the heuristics you need to solve it, but we'll see if I'm still in the mood for Snakebird. But yeah, subscribe to the channel for more, keep up every day, and I'll see you guys next time.